Hey guys, so here is your daily instructional video. So we're going to go over the objective and what you should be able to do by the end of the class period, and then we'll go over the notes that you have to take, and then what your assignment is today. So your objective today is to compare traits that are passed through asexual and sexual reproduction. So in order to do that, we have to figure out what is asexual reproduction. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And your product students will complete a hashtag for asexual reproduction summarizing what it is. So in your assignment is an ed puzzle, and then on the comments section of the assignment, I want you to put a hashtag summarizing asexual reproduction. So for those of you in class, you are going to glue the notes to your right side of your notebook and title the page Asexual Reproduction. For those of you at home, just title your page Asexual Reproduction so that you can write the following notes. Okay, so first, what is asexual reproduction? It's a type of reproduction that only requires one parent and the offspring are an exact copy of the parent, so it's a clone. So you only have one parent, so there's no genetic variation, so you don't get genes from mom and dad, you just get your genes from one parent. And of course, this is not humans, but this is more plants and amoebas, bacteria, viruses, stuff like that. So they only require one parent and the offspring is an exact copy. Okay. For those of you at home, I'm sorry I meant to tell you, and those at school, you guys are going to be writing, of course, this one, and then after that, whatever is in red. So you only have to write what's in red on the slide. Okay, so asexual reproduction, organisms that reproduce asexually cannot develop much variety because they're copying the original organism exactly. So in other words, you only have one parent and you're gonna look exactly like that parent. So there's no genetic variation, meaning there's not gonna be any differences in your population because you're exactly like everybody else. This does not allow for evolution of the species, which means evolution is just change over time, and there's not going to be any change because everybody's the exact same, and anytime that they reproduce, they're going to make something that's exactly the same as them. So there's no genetic variation, so there's not going to be any change. Each organism is the exact same as its parent. This process is a relatively short period of time. It can produce 1 to hundreds of offspring. So a good thing, advantage of organisms that do asexual reproduction is that it's pretty quick. It doesn't take a long time to produce offspring. Again, you're writing what's in red. So there's a few methods of asexual reproduction that organisms can do depending on the organism. So there's binary fission, there's budding. We're not going to go over fragmentation. It's supposed to be regeneration. I'm sorry. Okay, so binary fission. So again, you're writing what's in red. Binary fission is dividing into two equal halves. So this is more amoebas and bacterias. So what they do is when they decide they want to reproduce, all they do is to split into two halves. Okay, amoeba divides after it's grown to a certain size, so it grows bigger so that it can split itself in half into two separate organisms, and they are the exact same. So it's pulled, and the nucleus divides, and then it divides into two. Two daughter amoeba are formed that are exactly the same. Okay, it's called binary fission. Budding. So that's the next one. Budding, you'll see in a lot in plants. There's this hydra right here that has budding. What it is, the offspring grows out of the body of the parent. So what happens is there's a little bud or growth on the organism. It doesn't reproduce with another species. It's still one organism that reproduces this little bud here, and then once this little growth gets big enough, it'll drop off and become its own bigger organism. but it's an exact copy of this parent because there's only one parent. It didn't have to use spores or pollen to reproduce. It just reproduced on its own, which means that this is an exact copy of the parent. Once it gets big enough, it'll pop off and it'll grow into its own bigger organism. So plants do this a lot. This is the one I wanted to go over, was regeneration. So regeneration, the body of the parent breaks into distinct pieces, and each of which can produce an offspring. So like coral, this is some organisms like coral and starfish can grow from broken off pieces. So if you break off a piece of coral breaks off and gets into the ground, it'll regrow another coral. Same thing with the starfish. A new starfish can grow from a detached arm. So if you break the arm off a starfish, that arm can grow into a whole new starfish. So this is called regeneration. It's actually pretty cool. And here's fragmentation that I didn't mean to talk about, but it's okay. So in this form, the organism fragments into smaller pieces, and each piece forms a new organism identical to its parent. So it kind of like worms. I don't know if anybody of you have heard that you can like cut a worm in half and it just makes two worms. That's true. I guess it really depends on the worm though. So if you cut it into pieces, those pieces will turn into a different organism or like offspring of that organism. But again, it's from the same parent, so they're all going to be exactly the same. Same DNA, they look the same, they act the same, they have the same DNA. So that's fragmentation. You can also do the same thing with plants. Plants do the same thing. Some plants you can grow from cutting them up and replanting them. I know that you can do this with ginger and tomatoes. You can do this. You just cut a small piece of them off, blackberries, blueberries, raspberries. You just cut a small piece of it off, put it into water, and it'll regrow into a new plant. Again, the same DNA, it looks the same, it's the same plant, there's nothing different about it. It's just another plant. Okay, so some disadvantages of asexual reproduction, that means bad things about it, things that aren't so good, is that the species does not adapt or adapts very slowly to circumstances changing. So what that means is that it runs the risk of suddenly disappearing because of a catastrophe. So if everybody looks the same and a catastrophe happens and everybody looks the same, everybody acts the same, everybody has no variation. If something were to happen, they would all die at once because there's no differences in them. So let's just say there's a disease for this type of plant that reproduces asexually, and it affects that plant. All of them will die because they're all the same. So let's just put this into context with humans. Even though we don't reproduce asexual, just think about if we did. Okay, so let's say I reproduce asexually, I butt off offspring that look exactly like me, and then a disease comes around that only kills organisms with glasses. Well, all my offspring will have glasses because I do. So we're all going to die at that point because that disease affects people with glasses, and all my offspring and myself would have glasses. So that's a very big disadvantage, is that if anything, a disease comes around or some kind of change in the environment, all the offspring would die. Some advantages, so some good things. There has to be some good things, or nothing would do asexual reproduction. Is that it uses less energy and less time. Like I said earlier, it doesn't take a long time, and it's not necessary to find a partner. And uses less energy to reproduce, which is a very important thing in the environment with organisms in the environment. They want to spend as least energy on things they don't necessarily. That way, they can put other energy into other things like eating or hunting or growing. And then, of course, offspring are usually well adapted to its environment. So if the parent was able to survive in that environment and their offspring is exactly the same, their offspring are going to be able to survive in that environment too. Of course, unless the environment changes. Okay, so this is a video on asexual and sexual reproduction. Um, I'm going to go ahead and play just the asexual reproduction part, and then I will stop this video. Okay, so we'll stop it there, and we're going to actually go over sexual reproduction tomorrow. So asexual reproduction, the biggest thing you need to remember is that it produces exact copies of the original organism. And there's only one parent, and again, it only reproduces exact copies. So those of you in my class, so ND, your assignment today is to go into Google Classroom. It'll be Monday. You need to make sure that you put a picture of your notes in today's assignment. The notes you can take from this video or or your digital notebook. Those slides are in there for you to copy. Make sure you put a picture of your notes in here, and then the link to the Ed puzzle is in the description for you guys to do that Ed puzzle. After you're done with the Ed puzzle, what I want you to do is go to the comments in this assignment and just put a hashtag summarizing what sexual reproduction is. Those of you in school, Miss Staton will give you a post-it note, or I will give you a post-it note, and I want you to give a short hashtag on what asexual reproduction is. So thank you for watching this video. I hope it helped, and have a great day.